Hello and welcome to NewsNight. I am Ladi Akeredoluale. Thanks for joining us today. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is front and center of international attention, with its immediate and remote repercussions way beyond the borders of the countries involved. My guest believes Ukraine was goaded into poking Russia and that the resultant conflict could have been avoided with more strategic thinking and less meddling from outside players. NewsNight talks to the president of the Association of Foreign Relations Professionals of Nigeria, Ambassador Gani Lawal. Ambassador Lawal, thank you for your time. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
We should begin this discussion by taking a look at the background to this situation that we have in Russia and Ukraine. Could you tell us a little bit about what you know about the sub-context of this crisis, both in terms of Russia and the Ukraine?
Thank you very much. Well, I think we have to situate what is happening now in a historical perspective, and then we are able to come up with a pattern of happenings that led to what we have now. I think since 1917, Ukraine has been part of USSR, and most of the actors in Russia today, some of them are born and bred in Ukraine. But events over the years led to a situation where Ukraine was carved out of USSR, especially during the dissolution of the Soviet Union. And as at that time, there has been different kinds of regimes in Ukraine, some favorable to USSR, some hostile to Russia. The present regime we have in Ukraine is desirous of joining NATO, which is a military power consisting of the OECD countries, USA, Canada, Britain, France, and the rest of them. And at the same time, Ukraine is being sucked into the European Union, whereby European Union represents an economic incursion into Ukraine. And so far, the Russian Federation probably did not see anything wrong with that. Within their freedom of choice, they are free to do whatever they like. But there is always a red line that a superpower like Russia will be willing to accept. By the time you now go into a military alliance with supposed rival of a superpower like Russia, then you can expect what we are getting now.
Given that background, it then shouldn't come as a surprise, the ferocity with which Russia has pursued this, because it is seen to be guarding its sphere of influence, shall we say. But does it surprise you that the reactions from other parts of the world, which, as you say, tried to draw Ukraine out to join NATO and to join the EU, have done a lot in terms of offering assistance, but they have refused to put any troops on the ground in defense of Ukraine?
That accentuates the lack of wisdom in the choice that the Ukrainian authorities are making. And I would like to say here that we should give kudos to operators of our own foreign policy in the types of choices and options that we make, which guarantee peace for our people. I would expect that the authorities in Ukraine should consider the peace and progress of their citizens ahead of any other thing in the choices they made. you know quite well that you are more or less a buffer zone to a superpower like Russia. Why do you have to tinker with the idea of bringing in a rival superpower into their doorstep? I think that is very unwise of any politician or any country to make such a decision. Because the way it is now, Ukraine seems to be a beautiful bride between the Western powers and also Russian Federation. But she has not been able to play the game very well. She allowed herself to be used as an enfant terrible against one power, which led to the ferocious reaction that you see from Russia. You are likely to get the same thing if Russia tries to do the same thing either in Canada or Mexico. The United States will also come with full weight and make sure that such thing doesn't happen. So it doesn't come to me as a surprise at all. What comes to me as a surprise is the fact that the authorities in Ukraine are playing with the lives of their citizens.
Let's take a look at the politics of each of these two countries. You've talked about the fact that in the case of Russia, it's seen to be defending its sphere of influence. But within Russia itself, internal politics is playing a part in this, isn't it? Because the president is driving this on the basis of nationalism and hackneying to the old days of the Soviet Empire when this was a very strong area.
Well, if you understand that Putin himself being a KGB officer, no officer of his own caliber will probably want to see Russia become an underdog in the international power play. And like you rightly said, using nationalism to drive this sort of a move is the best option that is left to him. If you listen to him yesterday, he tried to present his story that inch by inch, every agreement they reached with the West, they breached it, and then they can take it no more. So as far as I'm concerned, we rightly agreed, it is no surprise that Russia is behaving the way it's behaving. So you will see that Putin is a maximum ruler. And for every maximum ruler, what they normally do is to play on nationalism in order to continue to gravitate the country and at the same time to hold on to power in their various countries. So Putin, to me, has not acted strangely at all.
In the case of Ukraine, there's also internal politics involved in this. In the recent past, the Ukraine has had presidents of various hues, those who are aligned and more friendly to Russia and those who were less friendly to Russia. For example, the immediate predecessor of the current president, Petro Poroshenko, was not exactly friendly towards Russia. But one of his predecessors, who is still alive, incidentally, was quite friendly to Russia until he was overthrown by a revolution within the Ukraine in 2014. In which camp would you put the current president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy? Would you say he's tried to be friendly to Russia or more friendly to the West, or playing the two sides against each other?
Well, from what we have seen so far, he is more friendly to the West. For him to agree to allow NATO or to agree to want to join the military alliance of NATO, which he knows quite well is a rival power to Russia. So there is nothing to say other than he's more aligned towards the West than to Russia. And that is why Russia felt that, well, if this is going to be the case, then you probably will not be president again. So let us see the way it's going to play out. I think he has been advised to leave, but he has said no, he's going to die with what he believed in, which I believe, I don't think is the right decision to make. Don't forget that diplomacy is about peaceful resolution of differences. I do not believe any leader will allow any difference to escalate to the point where guns are being drawn out against each other. As far as I'm concerned, he has carried this too far, because at the time he's supposed to back out, he refused to, because it's not that Russia did not signal various warnings to him, but he chose to ignore such warnings. And this is the result of such recalcitrant, in towing the path of compromise. When you say diplomacy is about peaceful resolution of differences, what you are saying in essence is compromise. Most of these disputes will have to be settled through compromise. Some of these compromise might not be available to the public, but in the end, peace will reign. Look at the Cuban crisis. Most people don't know that there were compromises before USSR turned back. You know, the missiles that were kept in Turkey were removed before they agreed to turn back. This is compromise. And when you talk of compromise, compromise is never ending. If you don't win today, you probably will win tomorrow, because the life itself is changing. So why should you say you want to stay there and die there? I disagree with that. That's the wrong way of playing diplomacy. The diplomatic architecture of the world is such that bullying is not allowed by any superpower against small countries. And this one is being checkmated through collective security. And we have all been enjoying this until now that a smaller country tried to play inventory against a superpower. That's a red line. They have crossed the red line. And as such, this is the result of such things.
Around Russia and Belarus, there are other countries, which directly or indirectly are affected by this or feel that they will be affected. One of them is Belarus, whose leader is a close associate of Vladimir Putin, even though he was also the one who provided the venue for the peace talks that started about this crisis. But there are other countries a bit further afield which were part of the former Soviet Union, which have since, of course, joined NATO. And again, how do you see all these dynamics playing out with what is now going on?
Yes, as I said earlier on, so long as their actions in the calculation of Russia does not threaten their own military arsenal, it does not threaten their position as a superpower, they allow it. Like I said, there's always a red line. The case of Ukraine is so volatile and very provocative that it's located in the doorstep of Russia. And as such, Russia is justified to think that, what's going on? We have to stop this. And that's why Putin said several times that on 5 occasions, those are the things he was pointing to, that part of the agreement that led to the dissolution of USSR was that none of these countries would join Western alliances, especially military alliances. But we see how the thing has been playing out. And then, because Russia has been playing underdog all along, but at the time when it gets to its jugular, naturally, it's going to react. Well, some analysts have said that in the case of final conflagration, it's likely the Western powers will subdue Russia. But somebody like Putin will not accept anything like that. What is going to happen is that none of us living here, according to him, will live to tell the story. What it means is that he's going to go for the nuke button. And we are not ready for that. So we will continue to see how we can, pacify the two sides, especially Russia to try not to go all out full war. At the same time, get the Western allies to accept some compromises. Let Ukraine be. Let it be a buffer country between the two, and let it continue to play its role for its citizens, rather than use it, to foment trouble for one superpower. That is going to be the compromise that we here, we probably will support.
On the other side, you have the United States. I'm wondering what you think about the United States' role in all of this. So many commentators have said since this happened, that is, since the invasion started, that the U.S. provoked and pushed the Ukraine into this, and then now Ukraine is on its own fighting the Russian bear, as it were. What do you make of the role that the United States played in the run-up to and since this crisis started?
As far as I'm concerned, the role being played by the United States is quite unfortunate and unacceptable by goading Ukraine to go that far, and when it gets into the middle of the stream, they backed out, started talking of sanctions. Sanction has always been there against Russia, and they have always been able to survive it one way or the other. So the big bomb sanction and sanction, that is not the issue. You will see that none of them has been talking about trying to violate the territorial integrity of Russia. They keep on talking about freedom, democracy. Well, freedom, democracy, is it going to be at the expense of other people? No. You can have your freedom and democracy, but when you begin to go into military alliance, is that freedom and democracy? As far as I'm concerned, it's not. It's a kind of a Zionism, trying to, play the ostrich by saying you are evangelizing democracy, freedom. At the same time, you are trying to gaddle a rival superpower using lesser powers like Ukraine and the rest of them. So as far as this situation is concerned, we will continue to see how we can get Russia not to go, the way of resolving to use of atomic weapon. And at the same time, we continue to impress it upon the Western power that a compromise has to be reached so that we can have peace again. This is my own position.
And then the European Union, which the Ukraine is said to want to join, which some others had joined. You alluded to it in your answer to one of the previous questions where you talked about the fact that when the Soviet Union was breaking up, there were certain agreements. I believe one of them was the Minsk Accord, where it was agreed that certain things would not be violated, and that according to President Putin, this has repeatedly been violated. So what do you make of the role of the EU in this crisis?
Well, I will compare EU along with its, with its master, which is the United States. They are also towing the line of the United States by playing the ostrich too. You see, because if Russia had been silent over economic union for prosperity for the people, they should not expect it to keep quiet when it comes to military incursion. So I blame them too for goading Ukraine into, well, you can support Ukraine in whichever way you want for the prosperity and the progress of the citizenry of the country, given that you feel that they are part of you and things like that, but not to the extent of using them to foment trouble or to create unnecessary unnecessary problem on the neck of another superpower. You should expect them to react, as far as I'm concerned.
China is, some people have said China had been very unnaturally quiet in all of this, restricting themselves to comments on the sidelines, asking for restraint and wanting dialogue. Are you surprised by the position China has taken? Because There were those who thought that China would be a natural ally of the Russians.
Well, it doesn't play out that way. China also has our own national interest. And at the same time, when countries are taking decisions, they first of all look at their national interest before embarking on any kind of decision making in the international arena. China is playing the right card right away, even if it's going to support Russia. Not me and you will be able to see that one, openly. But the best thing it can do is what it's doing now, calling for restraint from both sides. China is doing very well, as far as I'm concerned. So far, it's doing very well.
You are a diplomat of many, many years, many decades, in fact. And what this crisis, what this invasion seems to highlight, as has been pointed out, is once again the seeming impotence of international organizations like the United Nations. When this kind of crisis occurs, the United Nations was supposed to be the gathering where everybody comes and airs its grievances and the problem is sorted out. But once again, the United Nations found itself, or is finding itself, on the sidelines, while other players are actually in the thick of things. This was the situation that led to Iraq, that led to the invasion of Iraq, that led to the situation in Afghanistan, and we could go on and on in many situations like this. Again, do you see this as something that is unfortunate or something that is expected and that there was very little the UN could have done anyway?
In any case, this is not the first time that you will see United Nations being helpless, especially when issues involve the United States. Because the United States is always trying to bully its way, simply because he who pays the piper dictates the tune. I mean, it carries a larger share of the budget of the United Nations. And usually, if United Nations decides to go one way or the other, it has the capacity to starve it of fun and castrate it. So what do you expect of United Nations? Nothing. You see, the United Nations, as far as we are concerned, if you see the composition of the United Nations with this superpower veto and things like that, you will know that United Nations is strictly, for the powerful countries of the world. At the same time, they are also beneficial to the lesser ones, who may want to bully one another. Yes, they are very beneficial in that area. So any country who wants to rely on United Nations and goes to foment trouble anywhere is on his own as far as this diplomatic architecture is concerned, because it's tilted towards those smaller countries or lesser powers who are members of the United Nations. So when it comes to superpower politics, there is little or nothing the United Nations can do. So I'm not surprised about the role United Nations is playing. It will continue either to provide, peacekeeping, peace enforcement, and things like that. That's what it can do. It's not going to enter into the bush or put boots on the ground in any country. It doesn't work that way. We have seen that so far since the beginning of era. We've seen that so far. So let nobody no country make a mistake that you can go and hide under United Nations when you go and start problems somewhere. It's as simple as that.
One big elephant in this crisis that is there, and many people seem to occasionally glance at it and then look away, is the fact that some of the players involved have nuclear weapons. And in the case of Russia had announced that it has put its nuclear weapons on high alert should anybody think of interfering. Do you think this is a very dangerous escalation of the situation? And if so, was it a smart move on the part of the Russians to escalate it in the way that they did?
Yes, you use the word dangerous escalation. That is the right word to be used in this case, because you will find out that all the superpowers, they have already reached the stage of MAD, which is called mutual assured destruction of each other. So by the time you press the button of a nuke in any part of the world, you can be sure that every other country will press their own. That is total annihilation of the whole world. So that is what is called MAD. So, if you have that one in place, then you will know that this is a very dangerous escalation. I pray that Russia will not be pushed to that level where it will result to trying to use its atomic weapon in this scenario. I pray that it won't, because you see, when Russia fears that it's going to be annihilated by the Western power, you can be sure that it will go for it. And they have said it, and they don't mince their words. So the rest of us should come together and continue, to impress it on the two sides, to de-escalate this current crisis and find compromise that will be acceptable to, not necessarily acceptable, that at least will guarantee peace, for the whole world presently.
Now, Ambassador Lawal, one of the things that has brought this crisis home to Nigeria and Nigerians is the fact that many Nigerians are everywhere. There's no country you go in the world, you won't find Nigerians. So naturally, there are Nigerians in Russia, there are Nigerians in the Ukraine, and in particular, there are a large number of Nigerian students, and we have been inundated with videos and visuals of how difficult this situation has made life for them. And it brings to mind the issue of Nigeria's foreign policy. You alluded to it earlier on. With specific reference to Europe and Eastern Europe, what can you tell us about the efficacy or effectiveness of Nigeria's policy, not just in terms of evacuating nationals, but in terms of relationship with the countries, Hungary, Poland, Belarus, and the countries surrounding this situation we have?
Yeah, for the mere fact that you alluded to the fact that Nigerians is present in all parts of the world, Nigeria needs to be very careful, in the choices it's going to be making when it comes to all these Eastern European countries, like you have said, because we have a lot of students there, we have people working there, and the Nigerian foreign policy is to, to strive to protect its citizens anywhere in the world. And one of the ways to do that is to continue to join forces with the rest of the world, in ensuring that peace and stability reign in most parts of the world. I mean, when you have peace and stability in most parts of the world, wherever Nigerians find themselves, then they can continue to pursue their life and, at the same time, being law-abiding citizens wherever they are. You will see that the Nigerian foreign policy continue to emphasize that Nigerians, wherever they find themselves, should continue to be ambassadors of the country. But where there are issues, Nigeria will definitely come into the picture to try and see that no harm comes to any Nigerian citizen anywhere. As at yesterday, a situation room has been established in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where every move is being monitored. The two ambassadors, both from Ukraine and Russia, are constantly in touch with the minister. So whatever is needed to be done, I can assure you that Nigeria will do it. Now we are trying to look at the foreign policy of Nigeria. One other aspect that we have added now is digital diplomacy, in which case Nigeria will not wait for government-to-government information before it takes action, though that can be very dicey. But at the same time, we will not wait for government-to-government information, because usually in international relations, you try to ensure the veracity of information you get before you take action. And that can lead to slow response to certain things at certain times. So that's why Nigeria is constantly, retouching its foreign policy with regards to how it relates to the rest of the world.
Given that scenario, do you think, in terms of foreign affairs, the foreign ministry, our missions abroad, where you have served in several of them, when it comes to situations like this, they are in the spotlight. And sometimes, from what one knows and what one has been told by other diplomats like you, many of those missions have difficulty in being able to immediately spring to action. One, many Nigerians who go abroad do not let the embassies know that they are there or where they are exactly and what they are doing. So there's no effective or efficient database. Then secondly, there's the issue of being able to get enough funding to respond to emergencies like this when they happen. There's a time lag, so there's a response difficulty. We have seen that in this case, haven't we?
As I said, that sometimes this idea of waiting for authentic information from government to government communication can lead to delay, because no government wants to make mistake, in the type of action is taken. And as I said earlier on, that Nigerian government has now decided that we will not wait for this government-to-government relation before we take action. So that's why we always now have a situation room to monitor events. I quite agree with you that this waiting for, authentic information through governmental communication channel, is not helping in this type of emergency situation. And that's the reason why we now have a situation room, and then we constantly engage both governmental and non-governmental players, both in Nigeria and outside Nigeria. For example, I'm here now, we are looking at how to reshape our foreign policy and to add those areas, that we believe are very important in terms of emergency like this. So I think so far, the Nigerian government is not doing badly.
You mentioned the fact that a review of foreign policy, that's why you are actually in Abuja. And this, I assume, of course, is a periodic exercise. It's something that happens constantly, not just Nigeria. Every country is expected to review its policy in line with current realities and changing national interests. Could you enlighten us a little about some of the key ingredients that go into this kind of review in light of course, the background that we have been talking about, this kind of crisis that involves economic, military, and even social consequences? What kind of ingredients are involved in a foreign policy review?
Right now, we have decided, to up our technological, advancement, the use of Internet of Things, in handling our foreign policy options. Like I said to you earlier, we now have digital diplomacy. Before, we've been talking about economic diplomacy, citizen diplomacy. We have now added digital diplomacy, in which case the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is going to invest massively in technology and ICT in order to drive our foreign policy. These are the major areas that you see. And again, in terms of funding that you've mentioned, the House of Representatives has been very, very, helpful, in trying to make sure that funding is no longer a problem. The last meeting I was involved with the National Assembly was to try to put the Nigerian Foreign Ministry on first charge. Even somebody suggested that 1% of the Federation income for foreign policy, it's neither here nor there. But as we are very glad that people are beginning to see that foreign policy is not a tea party. And as such, they need a huge funding in order to carry out their responsibility.
Given that scenario, again, in order to break it down a little, foreign policy, is it a situation where you have a broad foreign policy and then it is broken down to policies for particular areas. So you have a European policy, an American policy, an Asian policy, and so on. I wanted to go into your mind to take a look at some of this without going into the specifics, particularly of areas that have not been decided. What are some of the things that determine this? I know that without being a diplomat myself, I know that trade is one. Nigeria's trade interests is one such determinant. Military considerations and security is another. But could you give us an idea of what you think goes into this kind of things whenever they are to be reviewed? And on what basis are they reviewed? Is it on the basis of contacts with the other party? That is, the other people, the other countries that are involved in the foreign policy? Or does Nigeria take its own position, and then when that position is established, it goes to the other party and sees how to synthesize this with their own position?
Well, you don't take a policy action in isolation, especially in international relations. Your policy input will have, to be determined by what is available in the international arena. For instance, you talk about, breaking down foreign policy. It's not a broad, idea as such. It's broken down. In fact, if you look at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it's broken down into different departments. European department, you have African department, you have Asia. So this tells you that the aspect of policy that affect all these parts of the world are naturally different from each other. And that's why, diplomats are trained, to be able, to handle policy issues and developments in any parts of the world. So foreign policy is not a broad architecture as such. It is broken down into what I will call, we have strategic partners, we have strategic alliance, we have our own national interest, and then we have interest of our own citizens too, because if Nigeria, with the population we have, and we are scattered all over the world, part of the foreign policy administration is to look at where do we have our citizens, and what do we do in response to those countries. So like I said earlier on, that diplomacy is about peaceful resolution of differences, and making choices that are very peaceful, and and the outcome of our policies will be beneficial to our citizens in any part of the world. So this is the way foreign policy is being fashioned out.
In the case of Russia and Ukraine, there are those that I've read who have said that Nigeria ought to benefit from this crisis, even while Nigeria may be joining others in suing for peace. Nigeria ought to benefit, or that Nigeria will also be a victim without being a participant in creating the crisis. Already, we are being told that petroleum product supply is being delayed because the ships are having to go around further. We are being told that because between Ukraine and Russia, they produce 1/3 of the world's wheat, the prices of all items that have wheat in them are likely to go up, just to take two examples. So when we talk broadly about Nigeria's response to this crisis, do you think our response so far has been adequate beyond the statements made calling for peace or resolution and so on? Should we be taking a more active role given our position in Africa? And if so, what kind of role should we be playing, especially given that we also have citizens in that area whose lives and livelihoods are being affected?
Now, this is a two-pronged approach. Our national interest, and then the interests of our partners. At the same time, what is the world saying? Now, our own national interest, as I've said earlier on, is to protect our citizens wherever they are. Now, these type of benefits you are talking about, Nigeria has never been known, to want to specifically or deliberately benefit from spoils or turmoils in any parts of the world. We have always been seen as a peace-loving country, always contributing troops for peace, operation, always suing for peace. We will continue to do that. So whatever benefit that comes to us should be seen as a collateral, a tangential opportunity that comes out of scenarios, within the international system. Not that we are happy that people are being killed, war is breaking out from any part of the world. No. Now, in terms of the oil you mentioned, well, we are still member of OPEC. So whatever OPEC dictates is what Nigeria will do. Nigeria will not unilaterally take an action that, okay, it's happening there, so let's do this. No. We are also member of the African Union. Nigeria is a leading country, a leading member of the AU. Nigeria will listen to what the AU wants to say before we take our own decision. So Nigeria has never taken the decision in a vacuum. But most of you, who are watchers of international relations, may be saying, "Oh, it's not too this." No, you probably may not be saying what government is saying. And so taking decisions in international politics is a very, very serious business that has a big network in front of you before we go this way. This is the way to go. And as I said earlier on, I think we should give kudos to the operators of Nigerian foreign policy that so far they have not put Nigeria in any harm's way in terms of options and policies that we pursue.
You mentioned the African Union, which again has also been silent. Individual African countries are the ones who have been making comments. Is that because do you think that maybe there are different opinions on the continent about what is happening in the Russia-Ukraine situation? That's why it's a bit difficult for the African Union to come out with a common position on the crisis that is the African Union position.
Without even calling a meeting, you will find that right from the beginning, Africa has always been non-aligned in any conflagration, even during the Cold War. The non-alignment movement is still very alive. And I want to assure you that when the time comes, the African Union will have to call for a summit at which a decision will be taken, and you will find that each of African country will be singing the same tune. But so far, what you are seeing now is part of the digital diplomacy I told you about. Everybody is talking. Even before you know what is happening, you've already read it in the newspaper. It's also on WhatsApp. So, and as I said, government has now realized that we cannot continue to wait. So we are going to put everything on the table. So Nigeria is a country that will not just speak because it has implications for the whole of Africa. So I think so far Nigeria is just being careful, and we are watchful. Like I said, we have a situation room where things are, we are in constant touch with most African countries. We are in constant touch with our strategic partners too, both in the divide, of this crisis. So Nigeria will not take a unilateral position on this issue. So at the end of the day, Africa will come up with a position which would be the position that every African country will hack on.
When you answered the first question at the start of the interview, you talked about what were the factors that led to the situation. And I want to also now talk about peace. Because no matter how many missiles are fired, no matter how many weapons are given to Ukraine, even if the Russians are not able to subdue it, for as long as war goes on, very little development or peace can happen. What, in your view, are the options for peace, and who should be driving those options? First, what are the options? What are the ways you think peace can be reestablished? And then secondly, who can make that happen?
Yeah, first, the option for peace to reign now is to leave Ukraine alone and devoid of any influence of any of the two superpowers, either Russia or the West. So as I said earlier on, the only people that can make that happen now is the United Nations. If the United Nations is able to find its feet again, and then they call a conference, of all the member nations, and then the issue resolutions, well, sometimes the resolution may not work, but you can be sure that in a war situation, at the combatants too also know their limits. They also know what is involved because of the citizens that will be affected by the effect of war. So the only body that can make that happen, as I said, is still the United Nations. And I pray that the United Nations will be able to find its feet, to try and intervene to de-escalate this crisis. Usually, even after the war, you will still come to the table, whether you are the loser or you are the winner. Wars are not won or lost on the battlefield. You still come back to the table, because there have been cases where war has ended in parts of this world. So people are still fighting in another part. So, but when there is a mutual consensus that war has ended and now it's time for peace. And as I said, the only way we can have peace now is for compromise to reign and to allow Ukraine to be a free country as it is, devoid of being used, as an inventory against any of the superpowers. Let the Ukrainian people have their own peace, and then continue to progress along their own way.
My final question, and I hope your answer will be as brief, is what role do you think the media has been playing here, particularly the international media, in either helping to stoke the conflict or helping to quell it?
So far, I think the Nigerian media has been neutral so far. They have not been able to. What I've been seeing in the media is more or less explanatory, explaining what led to this, what led to that, or giving people information as to what they don't know. The Nigerian media has not, gone out of its way, to precipitate government into taking any particular position on this issue. So the Nigerian media so far, they have been doing what they are supposed to do, and I think they've been doing well, in my own estimation.
Thank you very, very much, Ambassador Lawal, for your time on the program today. It's been our pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much.
That's our program today. We would, of course, like to hear from you on the conversation. Our social media handles are right there on your screen. You can also listen to this and previous episodes of the program via our podcast. Please visit our website, channelstv.com/podcast to get started. I am Ladi Akiriduluale. Goodbye.